All right, guys, welcome to today's video. We're going to talk about enrolled agent study tips. So I do have a PowerPoint presentation that I want to go over with you guys, but a quick introduction for those that are new to me. My name is Krista Tyus. I teach tax and accounting professionals how to get more clients and scale their virtual firm to six figures. And I do that with my program, Tax and Accounting Six Figure Accelerator. So if you want to work with me, if you want to learn how to start, grow, or scale your virtual tax and bookkeeping business, go ahead and check out the resources below. All right, so I want to go over, some really great study tips for those of you that are on your enrolled agent journey. So I'm really excited because you know that, becoming an enrolled agent is something that I advocate for. I definitely implore all of you, if you're making taxes your main entrepreneurial journey, then to become an enrolled agent. It's going to make you much more confident. You're going to be able to take on better clients. You're going to be more knowledgeable. There's so many great benefits going on your enrolled agent journey. So I have prepared a quick presentation for you guys going over the steps. So let's start with the quick facts. One, the special enrollment examination is 3 different exams, and you have to take it at a testing center. So you register on Prometric, and I'm going to walk through that in a few, and there is a $185 fee for each exam. So you're going to take an individual exam, a business tax law, and then a representation tax law. And you do get upwards to 3 hours when you go to the testing center to pass the exam, right? So they give you ample amount of time. They're going to give you a scratch piece of paper with a pencil. They're also going to give you a calculator, and that's going to be how you're going to take that exam. Now, here are some study tips. So the first thing that you want to do is review what's actually going to be tested. Okay. And we could do this at Prometric's website. So I go to www.prometric.com. You want to scroll here where it says test takers and then find my exam. Under find my exam, you want to type in special enrollment. And then you want to search that. Now you're going to get the IRS special enrollment examination. Now from here, it gives you all the information that you need. You can even, schedule your exam directly from this page, or you do have to start an account with Prometric as well. But here's the information that you want to get to. First things first, you want to know what's going to be on the exam. So we can go to part 1, for example, and this is everything that's going to be on the exam. And it even tells you how many questions is going to be on the exam with regards to this particular point. So this point right here says preliminary work and taxpayer data, 14 questions. So they're going to ask you use of prior year returns for comparison, accuracy, and carryovers for current year, taxpayer personal information, filing requirements and due date, taxpayer filing status, right? So this is everything that is going to be tested on the special enrollment examination individual portion. Now, the nuanced part about this is that if you aren't familiar with how to, look at this stuff, you're kind of just like, okay, residency status and citizenship. So you have an idea that you need to understand, visas, green cards, resident alien or non-resident alien. The beautiful part about this is that if you buy a course, well, your course is already going to have this information compiled for you, where you don't have to go on like irs.gov and research this one by one to try to, compile this information together. So this is why we implore you guys to buy a course or to buy a book or a combination of both that you can utilize to speed up this process. So you know exactly what it is that you need to study when it comes to all of this information. But this is how you want to, first things first is understand and familiarize yourself, like what's actually going to be tested on the final examination. And then the weighting of each particular domain, how many questions is going to be dedicated to that. So estate tax, right? They're going to have 11 questions just with regards to estate. So, will behoove you to really understand, gross estate, taxable estate. What is the unified credit? What is considered jointly held property with regards to estate, right? So now that you know what's going to be tested, the next thing we do is get a course, right? A course that has already compiled this information. There's some great options out there. What we've always told you guys is that we've partnered with Certifiable.com, and I've actually recorded and taught the majority of the special enrollment examination course on Certifiable. So you're going to go to your library. and then you're going to scroll to your course. So for instance, let's go to Enroll Agent University Individual Tax Law, and then we're going to go to a training video. So I'm just going to play a few just so you can hear what it sounds like.
Welcome to Tax Returns for Individuals. So in this training module, we're going to start with use of prior year returns, and then we're going to end it with talking about the following deadline exceptions. So use of prior year returns. So the IRS mandates that you and your client, you guys need to keep your copies for at least 3 years, copies of all tax returns. Now, your clients, they need to keep copies because there are various financial institutions, such as when your client goes to get a mortgage, or when they buy or refinance at home, or get a loan for their business, or even apply for federal aid for higher education, where they will be required to remit over their prior year return.
So this is a very good sample of how I teach my courses, how I go through the actual material. I do draw upon a lot of my personal opinion or real world examples that I've been through to tie in the content. So not only do you get a training video, but you also do get a download right here where you can actually download all of that information and read it. And you'll also get the book as well. So this is the entire lesson for use of prior year returns and everything that I talk about and go over in this particular training lesson, right? To coincide with what they're actually going to be testing on, right? Use of prior year returns. We go over everything that you need to know with this first point. Okay. And then so forth for all the other points that Prometric is going to test you on. Now, the other thing that you want is, let's go back to my PowerPoint. You want to be able to set a very specific study time just for you to go through course content, for you to actually go through and read all the material, read the book and everything. And I tell folks to typically set aside at least a minimum of 1 hour per day. Now, on average, it should probably take you about 20 hours per exam to study for. So a total of 60 hours of studying. So we break that down into at least 1 hour per day. If you can devote 1 hour per day and getting through at least one of these training videos, right? So this training video is 57 minutes long. Boom, you get through this training video, you review the PowerPoint, you read that, and then you go ahead and take the pop quiz. That's your hour per day, right? If you can do that, you can realistically pass all of the exams within 60 to 75 days. Some people have done it, quicker, because they have more time on their hands. But on average, if you can devote at least 1 hour per day, you should be able to study and take each part of the special enrollment examination within about 2 to 2.5 months. Now, the next thing that you want to do is make sure that you practice, right? You practice answering questions. So if we go here to use of prior year returns and we go to the practice exam, now I can come here and actually take some practice examinations to make sure that I retain this information. So this first question is, for how long should taxpayers need to keep their tax return as per the advice of the IRS? So is it 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, or 4 years? And so I selected the right answer is 3 years. And then it gives you an explanation. So it says the period of limitations is the period of time in which you can amend your tax return to claim a credit or refund, or the IRS can assess additional taxes. Keep records for 3 years from the date of the filed original return, or 2 years from the date the taxpayer paid the tax, whichever is later, if a taxpayer files a claim for credit or refund after they file a return. Okay. Now let's look at one more question. So let's go to the next question. So it says a taxpayer who cannot obtain a Social Security number, SSN, must apply for and blank or and blank in order to file a U.S. tax return. So your options were I-10 or A-10, I-10 or AGI, S-10 or A-10, I-10 or SSN. So the correct answer is a I-10, which is an individual taxpayer's identification number, or an A-10, which is an adopted taxpayer identification number. Okay. And let's do one more question. Let's see if I can get a really good one. In my opinion, a good one. All right. So here we go. So what penalty could taxpayers potentially avoid if they file Form 4868, application for automatic extension of time to file U.S. individual income tax return? So A was interest on the amount due, B, failure to pay, C, failure to file, and D, failure to pay proper estimated tax. So the correct answer was C, failure to file, and then it gives you an explanation of that answer. So what I tell my students is that you should be able to pass your practice examinations with a 100%. That's the goal. You want to get a 100% on each practice exam. So after each lesson, you should be able to take a practice exam, get a 100%. If you didn't, keep retaking it until you get a 100%. So you know the information that you need to study back up. So you know what information you need to restudy. Okay. All right. Now, after you pass the practice exams and you get through all of the content, then you want to take a practice final exam. Okay. So you do want to take a practice final exam. Now, these final exams within Certifiable are 100 questions that you can take. And you want to make sure, just as the pop quiz, that you get a 100%. If you can realistically get a 100% on all of the pop quizzes and the final examination, you know that you have a high degree of comprehension. But we don't stop there, right? So the last thing that I want you to do after you take the course, you read the PowerPoints or you read the book, you study 1 hour per day, you take the practice quizzes, you pass it with the 100%, you take the practice exams, you pass that with the 100%. I want you to go back to the Prometric list and I want you to call off this information off the top of your head. I want you to actually test your knowledge. So now after you go through the content, now this sheet of paper actually makes sense, right? You actually can look at it and be like, oh, I understand what itemized deductions are. I understand what basis is, right? So you should be able to look at the sheet that Prometric gives you. Remember, we got this off Prometric's website on all of the questions that they're going to be testing you on. And now we should be able to actually look at this and be like, hey, I know what residency status is, and I know how to qualify someone for residency status for the purposes of knowing which tax return they need to complete. So for instance, for a non-resident alien, I know after taking, the individual tax course that a non-resident alien is someone that lives in another country. However, they have business income or they derive income from the United States. Therefore, they have a filing requirement for the United States, right? They have a tax filing requirement, in which case this person is going to fill out 1040 NR. So now I can go through this entire list and say, okay, taxpayer filing status. We have a single filing status. We have a head of household. We have married filing joint, married filing separate, and qualifying widow or widower. And then I should be able to explain all of those, who would typically qualify for single and who typically qualify for qualifying widow or widower, right? I want to go through this list and I want to call off all of these prompts off the top of my head. What qualifies for dependency? What are some available credits? I should be able to call off, a dependent care credit is a credit that taxpayers can take when they pay for qualified dependent care for a dependent, for a disabled spouse, or an elderly parent, right? I should be able to call that off very succinctly. So this is how I tell my students to go through the content. They should be able to know what is an IRA conversion or recharacterization, right? What is a required minimum distribution? Well, a required minimum distribution is a required amount that a taxpayer must take from their individual retirement account when they reach the age of 72 for a traditional IRA, right? And then I should know, the difference between a Roth IRA versus traditional IRA. So this is how we have our students go through this content. It's not enough to just pass the practice exam, pass the quizzes. You need to be able to go to this section and be able to call off this information off the top of your head. You should know this at a really high degree. If you can do that, well, the questions are going to become easier, right? Because it doesn't matter how the question is worded. If you understand this content, you're going to be able to answer the questions at a high degree. Okay, so let's actually look at some questions, some sample questions. So I'm going to look at some sample questions for individual, and this is directly from irs.gov. All right, so let's look at some real questions that was on past tests. So right here, so it says 2 taxpayers married on November 30th. That same year, the husband enrolled in an accredited college to further his career and subsequently received a Form 1098-T tuition statement. The wife was employed with an income of $45,000 and paid for the husband's education expenses. The taxpayers did not receive any other income for the year. Based upon the circumstances, what is the correct method to report the education credit? So it says option A, taxpayers must file a joint return to claim an education credit. Option B, based upon the wife's AGI, they do not qualify to claim an education credit. Option C, husband is ineligible to claim an education credit because the wife paid his education expenses. Or option D, wife should report non-qualified education expenses on Form 8863, education credits for the American Opportunity and Lifetime Learning credits. It says right here that the answer is A. And why would the answer be A? So first of all, let's look at why these answers are wrong. So it says based upon the wife's AGI, they do not qualify for an education credit. Well, that's not true. Her AGI is lower than the required amount, so they will be able to claim the credit. Option C is wrong because it says the husband is ineligible to claim an education credit because the wife paid his education expenses. Well, that's not true. If they file jointly, they can claim the credit, and it doesn't matter if the wife or the husband pay for those expenses. And then option D, it says the wife should report non-qualified education expenses on Form 8863. Well, that won't be right because Form 8863 is for qualified education expenses, right? So we can know this question is the right answer just by the process of elimination on why these other answers are wrong. So this is how the IRS or Prometric is going to word the exam. They're going to give you these long drawn out examples. But if you know the facts of credits and who can qualify for a credit and you understand filing status, you understand that typically if a married couple is filing separate, that they don't qualify for a lot of different credits, right? But if they file joint, not only do they get a higher standard deduction amount, which effectively reduces their tax liability, but they also qualify for more credits than they would typically if they were to file separately. So what you want to do is you want to go ahead and download these sample questions and get used to seeing these types of questions, or just you want to armor yourself up with as much resources as possible so that you feel confident. At the end of the day, if you focus on the content, if you focus on understanding this material, truly understanding it, not just memorizing it, right? Not just off of memory, but truly understanding tax law, you will have a higher degree of passing the examinations and being one step closer to becoming an enrolled agent. All right, guys, I hope this was helpful. I'm really excited for you guys. I would love for you to take our course on certifiable.com. So you can head to www.certifiable.com and enroll in the EA course where I teach the majority of that course for you guys. And you can participate in our private Facebook group. And you also get weekly check-in calls. Every Tuesday, we have check-in calls to go over the content, to answer any questions that you have. And we meet on Zoom to make sure that you understand the content, right? Which is important. Go ahead and drop your questions below, and I'll see you in the next training video. Bye, guys.